Now that we've got our introduction done, it's time to dive into the meat of the essay, and that's in the body paragraphs. In one of the previous videos, I talked about the different options I have in approaching the body paragraphs, and I decided that for this essay, I'm going to go with the chronological chunks that I created, because I thought the passage is broken into these 3 different sections that are each about a different thing. So I can use that to give each body paragraph a focus. The first section is about Elizabeth's use of slang. Now, she's still part of the lower class when her father, who has worked his way up, sees her again for the first time in a long time. So she uses working class slang. But my thesis is about social class driving a wedge, and her father uses her slang as a way of criticizing her. So that seems to support my thesis. So I've got to find evidence within this passage, the evidence that I'm going to use. And it needs to focus on diction, physical description, and characterization. So the characterization I could use is her father being very critical with this open chiding of her and her use of dialect and the repetition of sharply. That's how he's acting toward her, very sharp and cutting. So that's my diction. And then here is where he leaves the room to separate them physically when she disappoints him. So I can use that too and get each one of these ideas into that paragraph. All right, I'm going to write it now. Okay, so I just finished my first body paragraph. There it is. If you want to pause the video and read it, go right ahead. But I just want to point out how many details I used. Hopefully I used a lot. Let's see. Okay, I used 7 direct quotes from the passage. Now, if you look at them, they're not long. I didn't use one full sentence. A lot of the quotes are just 2 words, like dialect words here. Sharp reprimand. Here's 1 word, sharply. But nothing is longer than 5 words. Terrible marks of the beast, reddened with shame and sadness, out of the room. Between 1 and 5 words. I'm not quoting long things. I'm just pulling in short little phrases that prove my point. Okay, how many literary techniques did I use? I used 3 I set out to use. I started out with characterization. Then I brought in some diction. Then I went back to characterization because I characterizing 2 different characters. And then I brought in the physical details that they mentioned in the prompt. So I brought in all 3 into the paragraph, and I tried to weave them into my analysis. It is also really important to be focused on your thesis and the idea that you're trying to support. So I highlighted in blue here all the times that I felt I was making a connection to that main idea. Social class that separates. Elizabeth bears the brunt of that pretentiousness, the growing disconnect between father and daughter. She cannot act in the upper class manner that her father wants from her. Their difference created by social class. I'm constantly making connections to my thesis. So I'm not just providing details, I'm explaining how the details prove my thesis. That's really important. All right, now I'm going to write my second paragraph. So I need to look at that second chunk, which is all about Elizabeth's handwriting. Okay, I just finished the second body paragraph. Let's see about the number of details I used. Okay, not as many details as last time. I got 5. But again, none of them are long sentences. They're all short phrases. This time a little bit longer, like the first one's 6 words. The second one is 7 words, then 3, then 4, then 5. So nothing more than 7 words. None of these long sentences, because that takes time. If you can just quote the piece you need, then you can support your point. Let's look at techniques. So I used all 3 of the ones that I mentioned in my thesis, but I only directly stated two. I have characterizes and I have physically displays. But here, my analysis is focused on that word, which would be an example of diction. So I imply diction more than I state it, which you wouldn't want to do that through the whole essay, because you have to draw attention to the fact that you're using these details. But I think the fact that I used it in the thesis and then in the first body paragraph, I don't necessarily need to state it every time, but I'm definitely going to want to state it in the last paragraph to make sure that whoever grades it is seeing that I am using these techniques. And of course, throughout I was making connections to my thesis, supporting my argument, explaining how the details support my argument. So obviously in my topic sentence here, I have a mention of my main idea, the meaningless detail that drives them apart. Then I also focused on explaining how her handwriting is a separating thing. Her father doesn't see her handwriting as something unique and individual. He sees it as something that would make her look different from the other upper class ladies. His father wants his daughter to do the same. Elizabeth doesn't write like a proper upper class young lady, and it angers him. And their social class difference, which is driving them away from each other emotionally, is made literal by that physical difference. So I'm constantly drawing everything back to that main idea. Okay, last body paragraph. So I just finished writing the last body paragraph. It's probably not as good as the others because it was a little more rushed, but I did the best I could. I got 5 specific details in, one of which was actually paraphrasing because I didn't have time to set up a quote and make the point I wanted to make, so I just paraphrased it quick, which is something you can do as long as it's a specific detail, and she dared to thank the servants. That's a specific detail, so it works. But all my quotes that I did use are short, 1 word, 2 words, 3 words. I worked all 3 literary techniques in: characterization, diction, and the physical details. Even though there were actually no physical details, I just kind of alluded to the physical details that I'd already mentioned and brought in some language that seemed to support that he was still doing those things. So I kind of had to make something work. But you can see from the blue that I'm consistently drawing everything back to the main idea. So now all I've got to do is write the conclusion. Of course, it's not that simple because I have to get that sophistication point. So I've got to find a way to bring the meaning of the passage outward to a larger perspective. So I'll do that in the next video. Midem now.